quote from James Baldwin from a essay of his. I think it's called like something like Uptown Fifth Avenue or something like that. So you can Google it yourself. If you put in James Baldwin Uptown Fifth Avenue, something will pop. That will be it. If that's not the actual title. So in it, he wrote, the only way to police a ghetto is to be oppressive. None of the police commissioners, men even with the best will in the world, have any way of understanding the lives led by the people they swagger about in twos and threes controlling. Their very presence is an insult, and it would be, even if they spent their entire day feeding gumdrops to children. They represent the force of the white world, and that world's real intentions are simple, or simply for that world's criminal profit and ease, to keep Black people corralled up there in their place. The badge, the gun in the holster, and the swinging club make vivid what will happen should their rebellion become overt. So which is a which is a groovy. I think the grooviest part of this little paragraph is, even if they spend all their time passing out gumdrops, they cannot escape their function, right? And so this is something to keep in mind, as demands seem to be getting more and more militant. Okay. To run down some of these basics from the curriculum, just so people are clear on terms. So extrajudicial killing of Black people is killing by police that happens without trial or any due process. When a police officer kills one of us, it is an execution on the street. It violates human rights when the government and its agents destroy a human being without a trial. Yet we have been killed without due process since really before the United States, and definitely is institutionalized by the United States. Extrajudicial killing can also be carried out by security guards or any other vigilantes who kill a person because they decide that a Black person is not a human being, but rather an executable criminal. The government lets them get away with it. Extrajudicial killing does not have to be with a gun. So now that this definition means, we put lynching in there too, but also, chokeholds, tasers, and the other ways that people are murdered, Black people are murdered. So whether to justify making us slaves, prisoners, or just dead bodies in the street, the idea is that to be Black is to not be human. Also, to justify making us slaves, prisoners, or dead bodies in the street, to be Black can even mean to be the enemy of human beings. And I think, this is a riff off of a Frantz Fanon quote that I'll give you all later. That it's not just that, it's not just that we don't have values or can't learn values. It's that we're actually the enemy of values. This is the picture that white supremacist ideology projects onto everybody's mind. Okay, so in that way, again, we Black people, brown, and indigenous as well, are a permanent enemy of the white power structure. Almost the white power structure exists only to deal with this permanent enemy that is us. White supremacy. White supremacy is the philosophy that only white people are human beings. White supremacy is the philosophy that white people are the creators and keepers of civilization and the best of human culture. And we see this all through the system, right? We from day one, right? What is the pantheon? Like, civilization started in Greece, you know what I mean? And then the Romans had it, and then the British had it, and then the United States had it, right? So it's this this Eurocentric orientation, really, or this Eurocentric um, indoctrination is enforced both by the the military industrial complex, which you can include police and by other institutions within the superstructure, media, education, and all of the like, right? Um, White supremacy is the philosophy that all Black and brown people and indigenous are less than human, less than civilized, and therefore should be ruled and dominated by white people, and also, of course, exterminated. The white power structure. The white power structure is the system of institutions, governments, business, media. I mean, governments meaning, all up and down from local to federal. Business, media, armies, prisons that all work together to maintain the power of wealthy white people. The idea is that oppression is not the result or practice of just one part of society. So again, what we have to come to terms with, it is not just we don't just have a police problem. We have everything. We have everything problem, right? It's not just fuck the police, it's fuck the everything. Okay. So it's not just one part of society. Oppression is enforced by every part of society working together. Mark said another a groovy thing about oppressed people that like will absolutely never be incorporated. That is what it is to be oppressed is to live in the reality that you will never be socially incorporated in the rest of society. Regardless of the individuals they let trickle in. The collective reality is that of non-absorption, okay? Oppression is enforced by every part of society working together. Racist politicians work with racist corporations, who work with racist media companies, who work with racist school districts, all to maintain Black, brown, and indigenous suffering and exploitation, to maintain white ruling class power and profit. The ruling class, small, wealthy white population within society that control the United States political, economic, and military actions and realities. The ruling class controls and benefits from the white power structure. So what's the relationship between the white power structure and ruling class? The ruling class controls the white power structure, but the white power structure is made of millions who work in its institutions. So a police officer is just a worker in the white power structure, but guess who else is? The teacher is also a worker in the white power structure. The social worker is also, the poet is also, right? Workers in the white power structure, and non-white people are workers in the white power structure, all right? So I wanted to rattle off some statistics. I mean, these definitions are pretty straightforward. But it's it's important that we it's important that we ground our understanding of social realities in these concrete terms. So here are some highlights from the findings of 2012. The biography of this actually is my mother wrote the study Operation Ghetto Storm. Speaking with she got interested when Trayvon Martin was murdered by Zimmerman, and started doing some digging. She has extensive movement experience, specifically in revolutionary news services. So she got to digging in coordination with comrades at with the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and just poured through case after case after case after case. And that's where the statistic, every 28 hours a Black person is killed by a police officer, security guard, or vigilante, actually, which is a number rounded up to be academically responsible, we did not include cases where the race wasn't literally given. But we know that, you know, if you look at where these killings took place, the odds are that it was a black person who the police murdered. But we did not count them. If you do count these cases, it's more like once every 24 hours. Here are some statistics. In most cities, regardless of percentage of the population who are black, the overwhelming majority of police killings are of black people. In some cities, it's even 100%. So what we found, like, you know, city after city after city, that like it was exceptionally high rates. You know, it'd be like, you know, 87%, 90%, and then in a gang, 100% of police killings were of black people. And even when the statistic was, you know, relatively lower to this high tendency, you know, where it'd be like a 50%, it would still be double or triple the percentage of the population who was actually black. Okay. What we also found is there's no geographic sanctuary in the United States. So north, south, east, west, all over the country, extrajudicial killing of black people is the norm. And there's also no safety as far as city size. Big cities, mid-sized cities, small towns, we get killed everywhere. 88% of the cases that we found, the police officer's life was not in any immediate danger. Okay. 43% of black people murdered by police were being stopped for being suspicious. So, you know, the cliche, driving while black, walking while black, this type of thing precipitated 43% of the black people murdered, right? So, you know, there's this misconception that, oh, there's all these 911 calls, right? And there are 911 calls. And a 911 call is attempted murder, frankly. But when you see it, when we come to terms with this statistic of 43% of black people murdered just for being black, then we see what the police, you know, what the police's attitudes or what's the police orientation to black people. It really just be seek and destroy, or again, evidence that we're just enemy, implicit, you know. 66% of black people murdered were aged 2 through 31. Only 24% were killed in the course of a police officer actually investigating a crime. And of course, we know that of those, there's probably a minority of that percent were crimes that somebody will get a capital sentence for, right? 19% were 911 calls with people asking for help with an emotionally disturbed family member. So the police show up and just kill the person that a family member was asking for help for. 7% were domestic violence calls. 7% did absolutely nothing wrong, meaning the cops even admitted themselves that they didn't have a reasonable basis for even detaining them in the first place. So like 7%, even the cops admitted they were literally doing nothing. 20%, only 20% had guns. Black people killed actually had a gun on them, but we know one, in like we seen the what was the cat's name? What was the other Minneapolis cat murdered in front of his partner and child? Got shot in the arm and bled out. Castile or something like that. Does anybody know?
Philando.
And
Okay.
right.
Philando. Yeah.
So it was legal for him to carry that gun. So these guns are not, they're not all illegal guns. Okay. And so if you have not shot a legal gun, the police have have no legal basis for doing anything to you, by law. Okay. So you can say 20% had a gun, but of those, some of those were legal. So so like an actual weapon, having an illegal weapon in the course of of some illegal activity is much lower. Or only 13% had actually fired a gun. Now, this statistic also is loaded because some of these shootings, they were not firing at cops. They had been suspected of firing a gun. They had allegedly fired a gun before police contact. Okay. 47% of the cop, 47% in the cases, 47% the cop or security guard or vigilante said their reason, they just said they felt threatened, even when there were no no evidence of weapons. They just said they felt threatened. And so, like, we see this all over the place. I mean, well, we're just armed with our blackness. So only of all the cases, only 7% were reported to have pointed a gun at a police officer. 5% allegedly drove a car at an officer. And again, this is alleged. We also know they plant guns too and say whatever the fuck they want to say. 3% allegedly reached for a police officer's waistband. That's also probably a suspect statistic. It's probably 1%. And 3% allegedly lunged at an officer. Okay. Of all of the killings, only 8% of the killers were charged. And the majority of those were the security guards. So I think maybe it was like one cop of all those cases actually was charged, one or two. The majority of those, the majority of killers that got charged were security guards or vigilantes. Okay. So, when we add this up as kind of as the modern evidence of what we saw a couple of weeks ago, where again, the United States is whiteness. The United States is the creation of whiteness, and this whiteness is principally a matter of violence, a relationship of violence. Okay, again, whiteness is not a privilege. It's a deputization. This is a military situation. Okay. And again, we exist and we therefore exist as permanent enemy. Again, so like, so 88% of the cases there was no reason to murder that person. And this is not to mention all the people that survived the cop shootings. If we were to look at how many times a black person has been shot by a police officer, it might be one every few hours. And also we have to also add in, if we add in our brown our brown siblings, that it might be one every 30 minutes. It's basically their orientation to us, right? So here's give you some, just get people who said it better than me. France Fanon said the colonized world is a world divided in two. The dividing line, the border, is represented by barracks and police stations. In the colonies, the official, legitimate agent, the spokesperson for the colonizer in the regime of oppression is the police officer or the soldier. Ida B. Wells says, And also Frantz Fanon says, so we have seen how the government agent uses language of pure violence. Ida B. Wells says, our country's national crime is lynching. It is not the creature of an hour, the sudden outburst of uncontrolled fury, or the unspeakable brutality of an insane mob. So this is an institutional reality, right? Is what she's saying. It's not just bad apples or just some people, a few, you know, or some region. Again, north, south, east, west, the same. And it's interesting. I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here live from the Bay Area. So my curriculum is called "We Charge Genocide Again," which is a riff off of a book called "We Charge Genocide," which is the indictment in 1951 that they just told me who it was last night. William Patterson. Oh, I'm messing up.
Yes.
Yes, William Patterson. The ginkgo has been working. You know what I mean? William Patterson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson brought this indictment to the United Nations in 1951, charging genocide. And what was interesting, we didn't know when we were, and my mother didn't know when she was quarterbacking this study, that actually the indictment read very much like the study. So basically the indictment was just case after case after case after case after case of lynching and police killings. And what was interesting was even like, you know, places like California were at a glance was supposed to be, or, you know, according to some people's working definition, it's supposed to be the most progressive part, one of the most progressive parts of the country, but had one of the Bay Area itself, right? It was considered I'm supposed to be in progressive heaven right here, but the Bay Area had an abnormally high rate of extrajudicial killing. Had several cases in the 1951 indictment. So there's no place we're safe, right? So it's not just just in this region they extra racist. It's everywhere. This is the institutional reality. This is the functional reality. This is the function of police, to repress violently. Okay. So the United Nations adopted in December 9th, 1948, this statement or this agreement on what genocide is. Of course, as you know, based on the analysis of Nazi Germany. So this is what the United Nations came up with. December 9th, 1948. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And you know, one thing or why we all should have been in the streets 6 months ago, a year ago, even 2 years ago, why we should have been in the streets as impressively as we are now, is they still had these kids in these cages, these asylum seekers, which is translated to tens of thousands of kids being took and literally lost, adopted away, removed from a group and placed with another group. Okay, that's a genocidal practice. And when I went down to Texas and I wrote I wrote a underqualified article on what I saw, and that my skills of reporting undeveloped. And you know, the interesting thing I saw about what I saw about South Texas, and also what I've seen about Southern California, is just how primary that military, almost even aesthetic is, and how naked a declaration it is. Like, you know, this is war on the global South, or genocide on people from the global South. Okay. And you know, so when you run and when you run down this aforementioned, you know, this definition of genocide, the United States, as it benefits the ruling class, is guilty of every single thing on this list. Okay. So what are back to give you some more quotes, and if we have more time, you know, and if you want to, you know, if you want to take, so all of this and more is in the We Charge Genocide Again curriculum, and these are all things you can respond to, or whoever you're learning with can respond to. But I'm just gonna go through them for sake of time. As if to, this is Fanon again, as if to illustrate the totalitarian nature of colonial exploitation, the colonist turns the colonized into a kind of quintessence of evil. The Black person is declared impervious to ethics, representing not only the absence of values, but also the negation of values. They are, dare we say it, the enemy of values. So, you know, from the fucking birth of the nation to super predators, you know, and on and on and on. The message is we are actually, you know, we are the enemy of virtue, the enemy of moral, and so therefore, you know, must be destroyed in whole, as it says that the United Nations, destroyed in whole or in part. This is a resulting ideology of this function. That's at the root of white supremacy. See, it's not, again, it's not just, oh, white people are so smart, or we so smart, or we so together, we're so advanced. It's also, they are, Black, brown, indigenous people are so evil, right? There's nothing you can do with them but destroy them. Why this is from the, you know, and actually I highly recommend the original We Charge Genocide book. There's this beautiful preamble that they wrote that is really just like out of this world analysis, really beautifully written. And it was interesting, one of the things they argued, in which the United States also is almost the picture under the term in the definition in the dictionary, that genocidal practices at home translate or live in a reciprocal relationship with genocide abroad. Okay, so a so-called society that practices genocide domestically inevitably practices it around the world, and vice versa. You know, white ideologists. So this from the petition. White ideologists proclaim those conditions are as Blacks want them to be. White ideologists skillfully and cunningly twist facts that expose the evils of racism to enable them to assert the inherent inferiority of Blacks. Thus, they seek to give credence to the myths of white supremacy or white superiority. Force and violence systematically and consistently employed to quell the righteous anger of Blacks is justified by calling murder an exercise in law and order. So we see that this is the same playbook over and over and over and over and over again, because as long as this society is organized around the maintenance of ruling class hegemony, and the perpetual employment of a mass white supremacist, basically army, we're gonna have the same. We're gonna have they gonna say the same shit over and over again. It never ends. It's the same talk. It's the same practices, right? And so therefore, well, we have to be clear on what our resistance is. Ida B. Wells, also points out that this deputization, right, is not even an honorable one, though, right? So it's not. It's always about overwhelming people, bullying people. Like she says, brave men do not gather by the thousands to torture and murder a single individual. So gagged and bound, he cannot make even feeble resistance or defense. She's talking about lynching, right? And what happens all the time? I never get, when I get pulled over, it never stays just one or two, right? Next thing I know is always, here comes 2 more cars, 3 more cars. It's not, so you see the purpose is to destroy me. It's not to get to the bottom of a situation at all, What then? What is the mentality of these people? From the petition, bored and gullible people, talking about people who work for the white power structure, bored and both as surrogates or pay taxes on their white supremacist military actions. Bored and gullible people desperate for something to do, impoverished both mentally and physically by the doctrines and practices of white supremacy, are susceptible to incitation to lynchings, particularly when the act is endowed with civic virtue, with an aura of protecting all that is holy from all that is profane. Okay. So this is the ideological reality. All right. That I mean, we could probably go much deeper into. Again, I recommend everybody run through some Fanon. I mean, all of these people I quoted. There's a mountain of understanding that can be extracted from their works and more, and a lot of insight that's actually usable for organizing. What I actually wanted to do now was to return actually to the what is to be done that we worked on last week, or I woofed about last week. Just to be again clear on or what are some guiding principles or realities of organizing, as we are in this kind of, we are in a moment, but we're not in a moment that can't be reversed. We're not in the middle of a mass energy that can't be that can't be pacified. All right. So again, one thing I want to restate: the worst thing is not to not know what you're doing. The worst thing is to be part of something that is not revolutionary. Okay. We see all the same practices, we see all the same language, right? And we've also seen what? We've seen resistance before. And as much as this is like, it seems like a nice time to fall in love with ourselves, we have to admit that greater to be real, greater people than us have walked the planet. People that brought so much more to the table, leaders murdered in their driveways, we talking about Medgar Evers, railroaded, locked up. I mean, there's still people in prison, how we get to a moment when it seems like we're starting from a kind of scratch is because all of these people were literally murdered and incarcerated, right? so we have to, we can't be ahistorical in our analysis. We can't be ahistorical in our quest for organizing, for organizing equations. So again, what we see is reformism, and again, we can define reformism as anything that leaves the ruling class alive. And I don't mean physically. I mean with their hands on this apparatus and with their hands on productive forces. They can come chill as long as they can hang it, and they can sip whatever they like to sip, but they need to be removed from power. Okay, any demand that allows the ruling class to remain in power to pull off is not going to get us to the finish line. All right. So now now here there's some more kind of specific or interesting there's some more, actually there's some more kind of general principles based on that general principle. I apologize. We can work more specific, and I encourage you all to work more specifically to get to the bottom of some of these equations. But one tenet of revolutionary organizing work is actually, therefore, you do not join something that you do not have the ability to transform, or doesn't have within it the ingredients to evolve it, or for the organization or the movement to evolve its demands, to start really getting to the, like we said, like we got to in the first session, really address the principal contradiction. If a movement doesn't have within it, and then don't get me wrong, there is plenty. I haven't seen too much out there that is impossible to transform, right? But what I'm saying is this needs to be your orientation to figuring out what you're doing and who you're doing it with, and to make sure that healthy processes of evolution and analysis and praxis, theory, practice, make sure that's all there. Because if it's not there, probably 10 times out of 10, you're going to end up in a counter-revolutionary situation. You're going to end up in a situation that actually reinforces the ruling class, and we've seen. Because we also can't disrespect the efforts of 2016, or when was it, or was it 2015? When was the Ferguson and Baltimore and people went on one in a few. New York went up, Oakland went up, right? We can't disrespect those efforts too. But now what happened? A lot of that energy got absorbed, okay, by the system. Some people went and just got jobs, right? And the system made adjustments, okay. So how what are the evolutionary potentials of what we are a part of? And it's your job as somebody who's made an extra commitment, or has decided that you're going to commit to a full immersion in a movement process, in a revolutionary process. This goes double, triple for you. That it is your task within any formation to make sure it's evolving. Okay, and if it's something that cannot evolve, then you let it go. But again, that's a general equation, but that's not rhetorical. I'm not speaking rhetorically. It's not like I'm looking at the news or looking in the streets and I'm just seeing all kind of just dead ends or historical tangents or anything like that. There's potential left and right, but this is to orient you. We cannot be part-time revolutionaries, okay? Because part-time revolutionaries cannot maintain a movement of clear political analysis, strategy, and practice. See, because we're not dealing with a part-time oppression, and we're not dealing with a spontaneous oppression. And a lot of what this full-time revolutionary thing comes down to is the dedication to your own development. Development, again, if you read between the lines, I guess what I'm saying is development, development, development. This is the life's blood of movement. They're developing their selves. They're well, you know, they're the people who work for the white power straight. That's the process they enter. They enter a process of development, of perpetual development. They constantly grow. Their institutions constantly grow. Or like I think did we say this? I don't remember if we said this. Even for the sake of maintaining leverage over oppressed people, a society, an oppressive society, has to develop beyond the familiarity of the people it oppresses. So it will constantly develop itself again to make our to not give the mass potential of uprising a castle to raid, a castle to storm. Okay, so even as just a military strategy, they're constantly developing, right? Along with that, I promise you, and they're going to adjust. They're adjusting right now. Okay, they're not going to fight the facts of this. I mean, they read all their class. You know, I read some of their classics, like Napoleon's letters and shit. Like, man, you can fight anything except facts. You know, they're not fighting these facts. They come to terms with it, like, okay, we're not going to be able to maintain this the same way. They're going to do something though. And so the moral of the story is your life has to be one of continuing political development, skills, theoretical frameworks, you know, just understanding. All has to be, and that's full immersion right there. Okay, that's what that requires. And it's also a groovy orientation towards organization. The development is the thing. One of the primary tasks of an organization is developing the people within it. Okay. A quote from Lenin concerning masses. Such workers, average people of the masses, are capable of displaying enormous energy and self-sacrifice in strikes and street battles with the police and troops, and are capable, in fact, again, man, it's the same shit over and over. This is like this is 1915. Okay, right? This is 1915 on the other side of the planet, right? Such workers, again, saying such workers, average people of the masses, are capable of displaying enormous energy and self-sacrifice in strikes and in street battles with the police and troops, and are capable, in fact, are alone capable of determining the whole outcome of a movement. But the struggle against the political police requires special qualities. It can be conducted only by professional revolutionists. I don't trip on professional. Seems like a little counterintuitive word choice, but we'll give them a pass. You know? We'll call it the 24/7 revolutionists. You know, the 24/7 revolutionary. And we must not only see to it that the masses of the workers advance concrete demands, but also that the masses of workers advance an increasing number of such professions or such professional revolutionists from their own ranks. Meaning, when it comes to mass organizing, this is who becomes the revolutionaries, right? So we don't just want to we don't want to just look at our immediate circle of friends or so how could we set up an organization or a revolutionary practice just with the people from our immediate circumstance or our immediate comfort zone? The program is actually masses developing into joining in the same revolutionary process that you're in. Okay, and then further, then the way a healthier way of categorizing people is not by profession, not by background, not by interest, but simply what level of immersion and struggle is a person in. Because we know that's the white way, that's the white ruling class way to give us all these categories, right? That serves a few purposes, especially in this age where everything is so corporate. I mean, even how people like divide themselves into all these little generations. It's like 4 generations alive right now. How's that? That's 5, 6. How many generations is alive right now? How are we in different generations? If you was literally born 2 years after, like somebody born 2 years after me is in a different generation, you know? This is really just corporate language, right? Because it's just, well, how we can, you know, how we can really how can we game up different demographics of people. We have to understand how much corporate culture we've actually internalized. Also, and this is as old as capitalism, when you divide to create all of these kind of functional identities, to say, oh, you're an artist and you're blue collar and you're this and you're that, is actually how dehumanization is also culturally facilitated. So when we think of ourselves as just, we think of ourselves as a function, as our function. And we make a huge deal out of it. We create a whole thematic universe out of it, right? And so then going back to, I think, what we discussed last week also then, so it's a revolutionary's job to analyze these thematic universes and then learn how to cut through it. Like, how can you get a cat to realize, no, you're not this or that or that or this. You're revolutionary, okay? And then now it's just a matter of how immersed you're going to be in this struggle, you know? Okay. Another, again, man, the gift of development, right? So another beautiful result of development, when we make the objective of organization development, is actually the more skilled, the more aware, the more, you know, the more healthy, the more sane all of the people in the organization are, actually the less you need elaborate rules and groupings and, you know, hierarchies and shit like that. Okay. And which is also groovy to synthesize kind of with today's, you know, with today's aspiration, because that's anti-hierarchy it runs through all kind of movement culture, some very radical, right? But here's the thing, here's the angle to look at it. You have to earn that. Okay, an organization earns a lack of hierarchy by making sure everybody is developed. Okay, so we can get to a reality of non-hierarchical leadership, but we got to work for it. We have to do the actual work to pull that off. Otherwise, the interesting thing that happens is everybody actually just really devolves when shit hits the fan. So cats can be, oh, no hierarchy, but when shit hits the fan, everybody goes back to their programming. We got to figure out who's, you know, because we all feel behind the ball. So then we go back to looking for, you know, whoever is the biggest person in the room can just tell me what to do right now if I'm in danger. Or if I'm in danger of losing control of a moment, right? But if I'm skilled, if I'm trained, if I'm well developed, well, then we're not going to panic. We're not going to panic and revert to unhealthy practices. Okay. So again, man, masses. The equation is to be to set up a process in which everyday people join a revolutionary process. And because we're not trying to manipulate masses, and that's kind of what you see a little bit going on in issues like how we just agitate people enough, right? It has to be a program of actual development. So then you really can get the, you know, what was it? What was it? Tupac Amaru said, "I'm coming back in the thousands. It's gonna be thousands of them." When they put him, you know, when they put him there, I think he was a Peruvian revolutionary. I'm not sure, but he was famous for saying when he was about to be executed, "I'm coming back as thousands." You know, they used to say same shit about thousands of Che's, right? This is how it happens when we commit to mass development, right? Um, we can't strive. We can't strive for the effect of a concept. We have to strive for the function of a concept. So again, you know, we don't want the effect. We don't. Our efforts are not to create the effect of some kind of liberatory reality, but we actually have to figure out how does liberatory practice actually function day in, day out. Or remember the actual commitment to consciousness over a commitment to action. Okay, or you never sacrifice consciousness for the sake of an action. Right now we have almost the effect of a new day. That's what it feels like, right? But how are people actually functioning? How are masses actually functioning? How are organizers actually functioning? Does anybody even know? Or anybody want to take a guess? So you know, we have to give a practice to this moment of clarity. So I mean, this is not beautiful. There's just a lot of death and destruction, but this is an interesting time, or a time to perk you up, because for among other reasons, it's like a better politics has entered the mass imagination. For those of us who've been like kind of like committed to organizing this whole time, it's been one of the most depressing realities. We just look at most people and we just like, this person just like, rebellion isn't even in their imagination. Like they can't even see it or don't even think it's worth seeing, or I don't know. But now we have a situation where masses have accepted, and even those who are not participating are saying like, oh, wow, no, you actually can have a mass movement that against the system, against the power structure. But now we have to figure out. But now we have to give that practice. We have to give this moment of clarity a practice, because anybody knows, if anybody, you know, like, okay, you have a moment of clarity when you figure out, but if you don't start setting up some practices and some habits, that moment of clarity is not gonna make it. It's not gonna last. All right. And we saw this before. I mean, if you look at the Occupy moment, that was a trippy exit. That was trippy in the mass imagination. People who you thought would never have a conversation with about politics were like, oh, what the fuck is going on? It did have some teeth. Then everything went back to normal, or everything went back to a genocidal normal. You know, we had Ferguson, Baltimore. Everything went back to a genocidal normal. Because if you don't put the real practices in, if you don't put development of both us and or those who feel like we're ready for a full revolutionary experience, and those who we trying to move to, like, if you don't put in practice, everybody will go back to sleep. Like Fanon said, no legitimate desire for revenge can sustain a war for liberation. It's even legitimate, but this, you know, a mass reaction is not the inauguration of a revolutionary stage of history, and will not sustain it. Okay. The objective of organization is to create a national movement and an unpoliceable movement. And again, this is why all of you need to stay on point, but also why we move towards mass movement, right? One of the biggest, you know, one of the what some veterans of past movements had told me is we got fucked up when we got isolated. Okay, the moment we became more and more isolated from the people, even culturally isolated, it was a wrap. So our objective has to always be going in the other, even if it's slow. Even if it's slow and we haven't figured out how to streamline it, we don't know exactly what to say to people. This has to be a constant guiding understanding. There has to be, and it comes with, and you know, and it comes with it's a natural danger, you know, to stick your head out in order to tell somebody something is to stick your head out. You know what I mean? I could just stay here in my little mind, you know, and have a million, you know, I can have a one mind revolution, you know what I mean, and be safe with it, you know. The minute I try to tell somebody else, well, now I put myself in danger. We have to acknowledge that. But that's we have no choice but to move in that direction. Okay. Another way to analyze, and this actually, I think is actually kind of the conclusion. It might sound repetitive, but another way. So we have, you know, we have a couple. So we have organizing as a matter of development, both, you know, of people, of organization, of mass engagement. Organizing as a path towards mass character or mass proportion. And you can also judge an organization based on how reconcilable is it with the system. Okay. How absorbable? Can it be reinserted into the matrix? This is another way to evaluate what you're a part of, and to figure out, well, what would it look like? What can we put together that, you know? Because again, the modern movement people, you know, slid the other way. And a lot of this is funded by the ruling class itself. Okay. Now that's not to, you know, again, that's not. I'm really not to indict people or places or things, but this is just what to keep in mind as you kind of architect whatever it is you're trying to do. Okay. And so concludes concludes whatever the hell I'm talking about. And again, though, you know, I'd even say the study is more important than the curriculum. So definitely, if you go to OperationGhettoStorm.org, both the study and the curriculum is there. And all of the quotes that I gave you are in the curriculum and more, and you can kind of use those as a springboard into your own investigations of some of what these thinkers had to say. And one that's not in there that also probably recommended before, but emphatically recommend again is Amilcar Cabral in his book Unity and Struggle. That's a crucial book on organizing. Because it was one of those books, I think I said this before, but one of those books written along the way. So it's like a collection of writings, but some of the writings are like literally like reprimands. Like, this is how y'all fucking up. And this is what we have to do to write this thing. And he did go from 5 people. Took 5 people and turned them into a revolutionary army of mass proportion that successfully expelled the Portuguese from 2 countries. Are there any questions? I hope I can answer them. I sort of want to quit while I'm ahead. Any questions? Nah. Man, I appreciate you. You know, I appreciate you letting me quit while I'm ahead. You know, and man, yeah, man, all y'all be safe out there. Take care of each other. You know. So, Amanda, you can go ahead and send us out of here.
Can I switch it back to you first?
Huh?
Should I just end it, or should I switch it back to you first? I don't know if it's okay.
Oh, you can switch it to me. I'll take care of everything.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I don't know how the recording thing works, so I'll send it back to you. Hold on.
All right.
Well.
Boom.
Okay, there you go.
All right, y'all. Much love.
Love you. Thank you.